Today, I am so excited to welcome Madi to Hope Survives podcast. Madi is a survivor and one of the sweetest people you will ever meet.
Oh,
So, welcome to the podcast, Madi.
thank you so much. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you. So, do you want to share a little bit about who you are to our listeners before we delve into your story?
Yeah, sure. My name's Maddie. I'm 18. I'm from Pennsylvania. I love to do music and art, and yeah, that's pretty much like a little bit about me.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. So, I met Madi 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
I guess
However
now,
long
yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's actually a friend of my sister's. And so Madi is an amazing, inspirational traumatic brain injury survivor. And she shared this incredible speech at graduation that just had me crying because of how relatable it was to my TBI story. And I've known Madi for a little while, but I just thought, oh, she is so resilient and so inspirational and so encouraging. I just wanted you to get a chance to share your story with our listeners because the people who listen to this podcast are brain injury survivors from all walks of life, family members. We have some brain injury professionals that listen to help get an experience or help understand brain injury better. And so, do you want to just start out, share a little bit how you got your TBI and kind of start
Yeah.
at the beginning of your story, and then we'll kind of work our way forward from there?
Yeah, sure. So I got my traumatic brain injury when I was 12 years old at cheerleading practice. I was kicked in the side of my head in like the left temple area. And immediately from there, like my life was completely changed. As weeks and days and everything went on, I eventually began to lose the majority of my vision, the ability to move my legs and walk. I was in severe pain. My cognitive abilities were completely messed up and different from the way I had previously been. And it took a very long time to begin to relearn things and um, live a happy life again. But I worked really hard, and I'm really happy with where I am now.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. So,
Of
when you
course.
first had your TBI, what was that process like of when you started to realize that you were having these symptoms
Yeah.
and your life was different?
Well, I went to the hospital that night, and I was told that it was just a small concussion and that I would be fine in like a few days. And then, after a few days, I was like, I feel worse. Like, this isn't getting any better. And my parents have said that my personality was pretty much gone. Like, I was there, but I just wasn't me anymore. And it was pretty scary, like watching myself lose all of the things I had known for my entire life. Um, and it was a pretty scary experience. And I just knew that something was wrong and that this isn't what a concussion would be like.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So, do you want to share a little bit more of some of those symptoms? When I heard you say, your parents said your personality was gone, our stories are very similar in the sense that, like, I also was told, you have a concussion, you'll be fine. I kept
Yeah.
getting worse. And my parents also noticed my whole personality was gone.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy how brain injury just affects everything. It's not just, most people have this perspective that, or this idea that it's just like, how like your cognition, but it's so much more than that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. When I first was injured, I was told to basically do nothing and just like rest and, don't watch TV, don't do anything that like requires too much thinking, or don't like play any games or do any art or anything. And that was so difficult because all I had known was either sports or art. And obviously I wasn't going to be doing sports anymore. But then to be told that I shouldn't do like the other things that I loved to cope with this, it was very difficult. And so not having that to go to for just a little while was very, very strange. But I began to, do art against what people had been telling me. I went to physical therapy one night and they asked me what I did that day. And I was like, oh, I painted. And they're like, you shouldn't have done that. And I was like, well, it's like the only thing getting me through this. And it doesn't put me in any more pain. It was just, like the only thing I had that I could do. And so then doing art became like my go-to. And it was something I did like literally every day. It was just painted. And
Yeah.
so because I didn't have much of myself anymore, going to art and like finding that part of myself again was the most helpful thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the research in brain injury has changed in the
Yeah,
last however many years, and now the protocol has changed. It's not go home and rest and do nothing. We actually should be doing some active things, and art
I
is a
heard that. It's
perfect. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because the brain is so complex, right? But when I had my injury too, like there wasn't the treatments that are out now. And that's a big part of why I do this podcast too, because so many people, they were dismissed from therapy and now they're at home and just struggling and they don't realize, oh, there's so many more things you can do to get better and, improve. But, there's this idea of full recovery versus improvement that I kind of think
Mhm.
we should touch on. So, did you ever feel like other people what did you feel like other people's perspective of your injury and your symptoms were, and how do you approach like the full recovery versus improvement idea?
Well, I feel like from early on, I was hoping for full recovery, and so was my family. And when I think I realized that that wasn't um, in the cards at the moment, I felt like I was disappointing everybody and myself. And I was so upset with how things were turning out. But as I began to like find myself again and find the things that I love, I realized that um, like I can recover without being who I was. And I can find myself without being who I was. And that I don't need to fully recover and walk and see and do all of these things that might not be possible for me to be happy. Like I can still be happy without being the person I was with the abilities I had.
That is huge. That is huge. That is such an incredibly poignant point. I can't think
Thank
of the right
you.
word. I don't know if that's the right word. But that you don't necessarily have to be exactly how you were before to find yourself again.
Yeah, exactly.
So, can you
Yeah.
share some of the symptoms that you struggled with earlier on? Maybe go into more detail about the vision and the walking and how
Yeah.
that has affected you as you've moved forward in your recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Immediately my symptoms were like severe head pain, headaches all the time, all day, every day. So I had that. I had very like blurry double vision, which I still struggle with the blurry vision. And now I am considered legally blind. I'm trying to think of other symptoms. I began to develop a pain disorder called CRPS, and that's in my feet, and it affects my feet and my legs. And that is one of the reasons for um, me being a wheelchair user now. Um, and so that CRPS causes like very severe pain. So I had to learn to deal with pain in my head and pain in my feet. Um, and then as for cognitive symptoms, I had a terrible memory for a very long time. I could not retain information, especially with like school. So school became absolutely terrible, and I dreaded going so much. I was not a big school fan. But, as I previously mentioned, finding art and everything and going back to something I loved like that was like the main reason I got to where I am today, because that's when I found the art school, and that's when everything really picked up for me.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What was it like? You're talking about the process of finding yourself again. What was it like?
Mhm.
You had your injury at 12, and
Yes.
then, your first couple years, you were probably just figuring it out, getting used to it. So, when
Yeah.
did you start to feel like you really were Maddie again?
I would say towards March of freshman year. And I remember a very specific moment. I was doing a like vocalist cafe with my school, and one of my good friends who was a senior when I was a freshman, who had really like taken me under her wing and just like showed me the way with everything. She had introduced me to come onto the stage and said that like she said that I was her sunshine, and everybody clapped, and my mom was like, oh my god, yes. And after I sang, so many people had like come up to me and been like, you know what, you are like a ray of sunshine. I was like, what? Like this is the sweetest thing ever. And I realized that people were just like, I was making people happy with music, and that people were proud of me, and that that I was okay. And I just realized that like this isn't so bad. Like I'm doing all right now. And I found my people and I found my place. And the people at my old school had never said anything like that about me. I lost the majority of my friends very quickly after my injury. So coming to this school and meeting all these great people who would say such beautiful things about me to introduce me to come sing, I was just like, this is it. Like this is absolutely it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
You said that you lost your friends. Unfortunately, I think that's a common
Yeah.
occurrence after brain injury. It's so hard because at first it seems like people are like, "Oh,
Yeah. They
we're
like
so
rally up.
sorry."
Yeah. And then all of a sudden they're just like gone. But I don't necessarily blame any of them because, we were all kids. And I can't imagine how scary it must have been to watch one of their friends like completely lose themselves like that. So, I mean, I wish it hadn't happened the way it did, but I understand why it did.
Yeah. And for you, you had to make some changes and kind of find yourself in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. And it wasn't the way that people had previously known me, and they were very confused by it. And I just understand, I guess, now.
Yeah. So let's talk about where you are now.
Yeah.
So you are 18, as you shared earlier, and you are about to go to college. So what has that process been like?
It has been crazy. We didn't think I would even really graduate high school because of just everything. I didn't think I would graduate on time, and nobody else did. And then I started junior year and I was like, I'm going to college. And everyone was like, what? Really? And I was like, yeah, yep, I'm gonna figure it out. And I toured a bunch of schools. I did a lot of research, and I found the school that was meant for me. And I got hooked up with disability services really quickly, and they've just been amazing. And now I'm one of my biggest dreams is coming true, and I'm leaving for school in about a week.
And what are you studying?
Art therapy.
And probably needless to say, why are you studying art therapy?
um, Art is what got me through my injury, and I did it without like a professional art therapist. And I think that if I can, be that art therapist for someone and um, help them through it, but also help them know that like I get it and I went through it, and maybe I didn't go through the exact same thing as what my patient would be going through, but I went through something, and I understand, and if I can help in any way, I would be absolutely thrilled.
That's wonderful. You're gonna be awesome. I can't wait to see how it all
Thank you.
goes.
I'm so
So
excited.
yeah. So what is your major encouragement for anyone who is struggling with finding themselves after their injury?
I think the most important thing for a lot of people to know is that, well, we all have, a lot of us have this plan of what we want our life to look like. And if that plan gets, messed up, we're totally lost. And I think it's so important for people to know that just because things don't work out the way that we planned or the way that we hoped doesn't mean they won't work out. Everything's still going to be okay. It just might be a different kind of okay.
A different kind of okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? That's the process of, how do you go from, you know, one of the major things that I have struggled with through my journey, and I still struggle with to this day, is the physical pain and symptoms and how that impacts my mental health. And, it living with chronic condition, it becomes this marathon that you never asked to run.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
And, you never thought, you never asked for this, you never wanted this, you never thought that you would be on this. And the longer that it goes, the more tired you get and the more you kind of feel like giving up. And so, what is your advice for someone on how to shift their mindset or their perspective when they are feeling like losing hope from chronic symptoms?
It sounds like corny and oversaid, but one day at a time, because you're going to have really bad days and you're going to have really good days. And if you have like 3 really bad days in a row or more than that, you might be like, this is what it's going to be like. And this is too hard and I don't want to do this anymore. But there's always going to be another good day. And you just hang on a little longer because it's going to be okay.
That's so good. Yeah. So what was it like for you adjusting to becoming a wheelchair user, whereas before you were an athlete?
Yeah, that was very difficult. Like all of a sudden I could no longer do a lot of the things that I had loved. And society was not the most accepting of it either. I remember one of the first days after I got out of the hospital, I was out with my mom and obviously using my wheelchair, and we had forgotten a bag at like the cash register, and the lady yelled "wheelchair girl," like to get our attention, to say that we lost the bag. And I was like, that's like when it hit me that I was like, this is going to be harder than I thought, because people are going to say stuff like that. And that was so, I guess, hurtful in the moment to be like, that's all that lady saw when she looked at me. And then I realized that like, that's all some people are going to see. And I think I realized that I had to not only like try to make a difference for myself, but try to make a difference for others, because I mean, nobody deserves to be like, hey, I see something that I don't always see in you, and I'm going to label you for it. And that's like all you're going to be. So becoming a wheelchair user like that was like very difficult, because not only was I not fully accepting myself, and other people weren't accepting me either. And so it took a long time to be like, this isn't a bad thing. Like, this is normal, and it's like, this is okay. But eventually I did get there, and I realized that like, just because my legs don't work doesn't mean I'm any less of a person. Like, I'm just as normal as that person, like running a marathon or something. We're just like a tiny bit, there's just a little difference, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's so good. Because I think sometimes when you have a brain injury, you feel so different and you feel so misunderstood. Yeah. So how do you deal with people misunderstanding you and making assumptions about you?
I think usually I try to do my best to like politely educate if I can. Some days if it's like a bad day, it's hard to do that, and I'll just like stay quiet and let it happen. But I do like to try to educate people when I can, because I don't think people often have a malicious like intent when they like say things or assume things. I just think they simply don't know. So I'm happy to try to like explain things to them. And I'd so much rather people ask questions instead of just assuming things, because that's just a slippery slope. So I'm always happy to try to talk to people and explain things and help people understand, because if I'm helping people understand me, hopefully they'll like use that knowledge and try to understand others.
Yeah, that's so good. I also similarly think it's so important to educate people about brain injury, because they do have misunderstandings about it. And I can't stand, like, you watch TV shows and they always make jokes about brain damage, that like,
yeah,
it's so annoying, because it's like, if somebody does something that they would say is stupid, they're like, "Did you hit your head?" Thinking that
Yeah, what
that
you
is
dropped as a baby, like, yeah.
thinking that that's okay. And there's just, it contributes to this misconception that brain injury equals unintelligent, which is not, it couldn't be further from the truth. Just because your brain is injured doesn't mean that you are not intelligent. It just means that it might come out in a different way than it did before your injury. It's still in there. And that was one of the biggest hurdles I think I had to deal with, because I actually spent many years thinking that I was so different that I was like, I wasn't myself. Like my parents even went so far as to say that I seemed like an identical twin of who I was before. Like I was that different. Like it was like my personality, my sense of humor, my taste and smell was different. My like everything changed.
Yeah.
And it was like I felt like a shell of a person, like so empty inside. And you said
Mhm.
art was a big thing for you. Music was it for me. You know, writing
Yeah.
songs and expressing myself through music, which is similar. You know, finding that creative expression. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, it took me many years to decide that I was still me. I actually went through this whole process of acceptance, of realizing I'm not myself anymore, but that's okay. I can be a new person. But then I kind of had to, you know, maybe like the first like 5, even 10 years, like I was feeling like I was just a new person and that was okay. And I had to get to the point of accepting that. But recently, in the last like 5 years, it's been almost 15 years since my injury. In the last 5 years, I've been like realizing, I've been seeing little pieces of myself from when I was a child or from when I was younger, or like, and I'm realizing I'm still me. Brain damage doesn't take that away. A brain injury, no matter how many brain injuries you have had, nothing can take away who you are and your soul and you. And so even if it presents differently or if it's coming out differently, you're still you. And I love that, Maddie, you recognize that so early and so young. Like that is, it took me a lot longer than it seems to have taken you to come to that same conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, not every day is easy, and not every day I wake up and I think that, but just have to remind myself that, like, it's okay, and I'm still me, even if I don't like the same things, or if I don't do the same things. I'm still Maddie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. So how do you remind yourself? You said you remind yourself. Do you have any like specific things that you say or specific things that you do on those hard days? Like how do you lift yourself up when you are struggling?
Yeah. So I would definitely go to either art or music. I rely on both of those very heavily. Um, or I'd talk to my mom and dad, or I've been so blessed with making the most amazing friends after my injury. And so I will go to them and they will remind me in a split second who I am, and, why I'm here, and why I'm still loved. And having people like that, and having like passions like art and music, get you through it. So I would definitely say I heavily rely on those.
Yeah, that's so good. So, what encouragement or advice would you give if there's a family member listening today and their loved one just recently had a brain injury?
I would say that it's going to be really hard, and that there's no way to like sugarcoat it. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be so worth it. After all of the initial struggle, they're going to start to understand, and they're going to start to find themselves again, and they're going to be okay. And it might be really hard getting there, but getting there is going to be worth it. And even once they've gotten to the point where they're, maybe they're not making a full recovery, but they're feeling better in certain ways and they're finding happiness, even once they've gotten to that point, there's still going to be hard days. But that doesn't mean that all of the days are going to be hard. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad life. It might be a bad day, but it's not a bad life.
That's great. I love your advice to the family members to know like it's going to be hard and it's going to take time, but the person will start to recognize it.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it's a process and it's different for everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
when your loved one starts to recognize what's going on, I know for me at first there was deep sadness. Like I had to go through a grief before I got to the other side of like, okay, I can be myself. Like there's a there's a process of grieving, you know, the life that you had or the life you wished that you had. And there's this really, really difficult when you realize you have a brain injury. You know, at first, like you said, you're hoping for a full recovery and you're like, you know, oh, like, yeah, I got an injury, but I'm going to be okay. And then when you start to realize that, like you said, okay, doesn't look the way you think it's going to look,
Yeah.
there's this sadness that you might have to walk through with them. But
Mm-hmm.
and for a survivor listening too, if you're in that sadness period, I hope this has been encouraging to you that there is hope on the other side.
Yeah, I really hope this has been inspiring and encouraging and not a big like sad moment, because it doesn't need to be. Um and you know, brain injuries, they completely change your life, and like, as you said, the grief period, and it's going to be sad too, because you know it's a huge thing to happen, but it doesn't all have to be sad, and even if it's a sad story, it doesn't have to have a sad ending. And yeah, the grief thing, I totally get that. It's hard for my family still to like look at pictures from before I was injured, because they're just like, wow, you know, it's shocking to see in such like a black and white way. Because when you look at pictures, you don't see it, the story necessarily. You just see like there's one picture and there's the other, and they're different. But I think once you mourn and once you start to accept, it gets a bit easier.
Thanks for sharing, Maddie. So
Of course.
what are your final words of hope for anyone listening?
Um, I just hope that everybody finds the people or the places that make life so beautiful, or the things that make life, you know, worth living. I hope everybody finds that, and once you do, it's going to get easier.
Thank you so much. This has
Of
been,
course.
I've been smiling like this basically this whole conversation. You are
No, me
sunshine,
too.
Maddie. You
Oh,
are.
thank you.
And I'm so glad that you agreed to come on and share your story.
I'm so thankful for this opportunity. This was one of the coolest things I've ever done.
Oh, thank you, Maddie.
Of course.